Hello everyone! Welcome to another meetup for developers using the Bitrix24 REST API. In this video, I will tell you about our new official SDK for PHP. Those of you familiar with our video course have seen that we have already used a small CREST library as an SDK in our examples. Today, we will start exploring a new library that will be much more convenient for developers. You can find the new library on GitHub via the link in the QR code on the slide. You will also find the link in the description of this video. Some good news here. B24 PHP SDK is published under the open source MIT license, which means you can use it in any of your projects without any legal risks. Let's recall what using CREST for making a request to the Bitrix24 REST API looks like. As you can see on the slide, it's quite simple code where the CREST call method is invoked with two parameters, the name of the required REST API method and an array of parameters for this method. This simplicity has made CREST an exceptionally popular way to work with the Bitrix24 REST API for various local integrations and small individual customizations of Bitrix24. With B24 PHP SDK, similar code will look somewhat different. As you can see here, we no longer pass the REST method name as a parameter, but instead call the corresponding wrapper method at the PHP class level. This is the key difference between these two libraries. Each of the libraries has its own advantages. Starting with CREST is very easy, even if your knowledge of software development is not that deep. Understanding which REST method you need and using the documentation precisely will allow you to easily make a REST API call. However, this simplicity also carries certain risks. The developer must ensure the correctness of the parameters and their formats. It's very easy to make mistakes with parameters like date and time, which are passed to the REST API as strings in a specific format. It's even easier to make mistakes with required parameters or the order of parameters in some REST API methods. Unfortunately, in such cases, the simplicity of CREST is not at hand of developers who have to solve these issues on their own. Even more issues may arise if you try to use CREST as a library for mass applications. Certainly, it can be done, and there is even such an example in the video course, but in practice, such a task will require solving many related issues that the CREST functionality itself doesn't cover. All these issues were the exact reason for publishing the new B24 PHP SDK, a much more robust solution that addresses many issues related to developing solutions for Bitrix24 from the outset. What advantages does a developer gain by using this SDK? First and foremost, its method and data structure auto-completion in the most popular IDEs, particularly VS Code, PHP Storm, and PyCharm, which saves time on coding. Secondly, the conversion of REST API data types to corresponding PHP data types. This protects against errors and allows for more efficient use of the language's features. Support for the batch method to retrieve large amounts of data with efficient memory usage. Support for REST API limits. Passing a unique identifier for each request to Bitrix24 to simplify debugging of application interactions and the Bitrix24 event queue, and much more. However, we'll look into complex problems a bit later. Now, let's learn to use B24 PHP SDK for solving simple tasks based on incoming webhooks. The SDK's functionality will help you in case the complexity of your tasks increases in the future and you need to develop a local or mass application. Let's start with installing the SDK to ensure that you can easily and conveniently use the numerous tools that simplify development from the very beginning. And in the future, let's agree that PHP, accessible from the command line, and Composer, a special dependency manager, should be installed and configured on your computer. You can see the links to both on the slide. Even if this may initially seem like an unnecessary complication, trust me, the small amount of time you spend installing these things will pay off many times over in the future. saving you from many unnecessary difficulties and making your work more efficient. So all the necessary software is installed and working as it should. Let's create a new project in the IDE. Download the example linked in the video description and unpack it in the project directory. As you can see, it's just one file, app.php. The SDK is not included in the example, but that's okay. Open the terminal window within the environment. You can open the terminal outside the environment, but you have to be in the project folder in the terminal. Execute the command you see on the slide, composer require. And here is where the magic begins. A vendor folder will appear in our project containing the loaded SDK inside the Bitrix24 folder, as well as a number of other useful libraries used by the SDK itself. Now let's go to Bitrix24 and create an incoming webhook in the Developer Resources section. We'll grant it CRM scope permissions, copy the webhook URL, and insert it into the loaded example as a parameter for the Create Service Builder from Webhook method. Let's make sure the code works. To do this, open the terminal again and start the local web server. In response, we see a message indicating a successful start. As you now understand, we needed local PHP not only to run Composer, but also as a web server for development. Open our app.php in the browser and ensure the code works. As you can see, Bitrix24 returned the data of the user who created the webhook. Now let's take a closer look at our code. Let's return to the development environment. As you can see, here we call the REST API method userCurrent using the SDK. The code demonstrated earlier doesn't seem much different from using the C REST library. So where are the promised advantages? I showed how you can call an arbitrary REST API method using the new SDK. This approach can be useful if you need to call a method that is not yet covered by the corresponding wrappers at the SDK level. However, when it comes to the main methods, the SDK is better used in a different way. How about retrieving a list of deals in CRM? For this, we need to access the CRM scope methods and then access the deals. The environment already suggests which operations are available for deals. Select the list method, and the environment will suggest the necessary parameters. You can go directly to the documentation page from the development environment if you need details. We'll save all the retrieved results in the deals variable and write a small loop to display the data. Note that the getDeals method returned not just an array of values, but an array of objects. This is why we can conveniently access specific fields in our code, and the environment suggests them to us. Let's go back to the browser and refresh the page. We've received the required data from the deals. Earlier I mentioned data type conversion when discussing the advantages of B24 PHP SDK. Let's see how convenient it is to work with date type fields. Using the SDK, we'll add the begin date field to the list of deal fields, and below in the output loop, we'll use inline suggestions to display the day of the week when a particular deal started. Now we can output this field not just as a full value, but by directly calling the day of week function, which is available to us because this field has already been converted to a date by the SDK. It's clearly visible from the inline suggestion values. Let's run the example and ensure the code works. Now let's look at an example of using batch method. We'll use a standard loop construct, and for data retrieval, we'll use the batch construct followed by the list method, which we are already familiar with. We'll just add the limit parameter to restrict the selection to 10,000 deals. Under the hood, a generator mechanism is used, allowing for convenient and efficient processing of large data arrays without unnecessary memory consumption. All other conveniences remain intact. The inline suggestions for fields still work, and type conversion functions as well. Let's run the code and make sure it works. Let's summarize. We have learned how to integrate the official B24 PHP SDK into your project, how to use the SDK's capabilities for incoming webhooks, how code auto-completion and type conversion work in the development environment, how to use batch method for retrieving large amounts of data from Bitrix24 using the example of a deal list. It's important to note that the functionality of B24 PHP SDK continues to evolve intensively. You will always be able to receive updates. Thanks to its layered architecture, these updates will reach you seamlessly, allowing you to take advantage of new features in your code at any time without breaking existing functionality. New topics await us ahead. Stay tuned and join the Bitrix24 REST API developer community, where you can interact with other developers and Bitrix24 marketplace and integrations team